This year and the year before, which has been the deadliest for Palestinian children, nobody came. Instead, they tried to make these refugees in the West Bank seem like big bad terrorists that can't be taken down, rather than literally refugees with looted guns fighting a nuclear army with special ops and undercover operations units.
These are members of the Jenin Brigade, a militant group now posing a danger to the Palestinian Authority as well as to Israel.
The disproportion in illustrating the two sides, it's not just inaccurate, it's not just an insult to journalistic integrity, but it shows an active role that is being played in collaboration with Israeli policymakers to make sure that any crime made by Israel either remains concealed or justified.
In the days after the attack, some of the coverage in the global media spiraled chaotically. One of the most prominent disturbing stories was that Hamas fighters beheaded Israeli infants, 40 of them. It came out when the Israeli military took the international media on a tour of a kibbutz in Kfar Aza, where scores of Israelis had been killed.
Women, children?
Women, children, babies.
The Israeli channel, I-24, ran the story first, based on a claim from one Israeli soldier.
They cut head of children, cut head of women.
Journalists were given no other information. The Israeli army repeatedly would not confirm the allegation, but it went out anyway.
Babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated.
And it kept going.
C'è chi parla di 40 piccoli corpi bruciati, decapitati, alcuni.
Allegations that 40 babies were beheaded.
Among the Western officials who echoed the story, the President of the United States.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
Just hours after that statement, the White House took it back and issued a correction.
Let's unpack what's going on here. When we are in a moment of really rapid escalation, of real deep dehumanization, the question that the media, I would hope, surely has to ask itself is, do we run after the most disturbing storyline, or do we say verify once, verify twice? Let's be careful. Now, Israel has very strongly leaned into an Hamas equals ISIS narrative. Now, this is despite the fact that Israel has, of course, had dealings with Hamas. Hamas has interacted with many, not only Global South, but Western diplomats and others. But Israel is setting up a narrative that we have to take an exterminationist position towards a Palestinian movement, but that is being defined so broadly out that all of the Gazan civilian population de facto becomes a legitimate target. They claim we're trying to distinguish, but all of the military activity suggests the opposite.
And Tarek, part of our confusion over this story is by design, isn't it? The Israeli military's refusal to allow journalists to go into Gaza to tell us what's happening on the ground. So how is the news even coming out?
Well, Israel is imposing a blackout on the Gaza Strip, part of what it calls a complete siege. That means no food or water, no electricity, no internet. Mobile data and coverage comes and goes. And because journalists haven't been allowed into the Gaza Strip, news organizations are relying on Palestinian journalists to describe what is happening. The most intense bombardment of Gaza Gazans have ever experienced.
We are not strangers to war, but how it feels this time. It's hard to find the words. It feels like the world is collapsing.
And some of those Palestinian journalists are out there on social media. What are you seeing? Who are you following?
Well, some of the most powerful accounts this week have come from Palestinians just on their phone. Among them is a journalist called Mu'taz Azaiza. His Instagram stories of the destruction in Gaza, the scenes in Ar-Rimal, a neighborhood in the heart of Gaza City, once thought of as a safe haven. now virtually disappeared after it was pulverized in airstrikes.
I'm here today to show you the massive destruction that happened to the most beautiful areas in the Strip, in Gaza City. As you can see, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. I don't know what should I say. But believe me, it's the most sadness that Gaza ever had.
On Thursday, Aziza reported that 15 members of his own family were killed in an airstrike. We've seen the Gazans who remain online posting their last words, their final goodbyes. Before we came into the studio, we checked how many reporters have been killed by Israel. It's around 7, but that number is increasing every day. The situation is overwhelming for Gaza's journalists and for people more generally. And the prospect of Gaza going dark, of Gazans being cut off from one another, cut off from the outside world, just as Israeli forces invade, is really terrifying.
The people of Gaza cannot withstand a siege for much longer. There will be no ability for Palestinians in Gaza to get out any news and information about their destruction, about what is happening to their lives.
The problem is the sheer size of the calamity that has befallen Gaza.
And it is very clear that the little information that we're getting from doctors and humanitarian workers and ordinary civilians in Gaza will soon be wiped out when Gaza goes dark, and that is imminent. It's very clear that Israel wants to make sure that the world can't see what's happening on the ground so that they can continue to carry out the atrocities that we are seeing unfolded in real time, in real life before our eyes. I fear that we are going to see a level of violence, destruction, and death of civilians in Gaza that we have never seen before.
The question now being asked across media outlets, where does it go from here? The one that should go hand in hand? How did we get here? More than half a century of occupation, Israel's descent into an apartheid state, extreme elements moving into positions of power, resulted in a hump for which the people of Gaza are being punished on a scale not seen before. The date will remain in our minds, October 7th, 2023. And like 9/11, the aftermath has included journalistic failings that cannot be blamed simply on the fog of war. There is nothing cloudy about a lack of context, a failure to verify, a call to arms, or just banging the drums of war. Where does it go from here? Into the darkness, with more atrocities to come.
We still don't know how this is going to play out. Is the Gaza Strip going to be made unfit for human habitation, develop into a wider conflict, perhaps? Israel and the United States and Europe thought that they could safely ignore the Palestinians and that we would simply disappear because we were encaged in the Gaza Strip, we were being devoured by the settlers in the West Bank, or we were rotting away in refugee camps in Lebanon, and the idea that these people are simply going to turn into politically irrelevant human dust. I think that now needs to be reconsidered, though I very much doubt it will.
Palestine is offering an opportunity for the world to actually say no, to say we won't be arming Israel anymore, to say we have a voice as well. For the civilian populations to mobilize. Look at Palestinians refusing to be colonized by a nuclear regime. No matter how much disproportion there is, the will to live and the will to live freely is so strong that they continue to say no. And right now we are at a crossroads. We either actually do justice, no matter how hard it is, no matter how unfamiliar it is, or we push forward and be complicit. And I'm sorry, that's just gonna put you in the bucket of serial killers across history. And do trust that whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or 100 years from now, the future will look back at this moment and it will look at everyone that was complicit, and it's not gonna be good.